Working? I think so. Good afternoon, everyone. Bem-vindos. O meu nome é Michael Baum, eu sou administrador aqui da Fundação Luso-Americana. Infelizmente, o nosso presidente, Zé Manuel Durão Barroso, infelizmente não podia estar cá. Our president, José Manuel Durão Barroso, wasn't able to be here, so you got me instead to welcome you to FLAB. I want to, first of all, recognize that we're very, very excited to have here Ambassador John Arrigo, who's here with us and who I'm going to turn over the mic to in just a moment. Also, I wanted to recognize a member of our board of curators and a dear old friend, Jack Martins, state senator from the state of New York, the fine state of New York. And you know, also our illustrious speakers and panelists who are going to share their expertise with us today. This is obviously a very hot issue. This is a good turnout on this topic. I think just the other day I saw the UK intercepted a Russian ship that was mapping some of the undersea cables. So this is obviously a very pertinent issue given the size of Portugal's underwater territory. And so without further ado, I want to welcome Ambassador Arrigo. He's going to say a few words of welcome, and I hope all of you have an excellent symposium. We're led by an excellent moderator, Victor Matos, another old friend. I think it's going to be a nice event. So thank you very much. Welcome.
Thank you, Michael. Sorry I'm a little bit late. The traffic was terrible coming over. I live right across the street, just so you guys. Okay. Okay, well, first of all, it's great to be here. Thank you very much. Thank you, FLAD, for hosting this event, and for us. And Executive Director Michael Baum, thank you very much for introducing me, for a very warm welcome. Thank you very much, Representative Grace Chang and Taipei Economic and Culture Center in Portugal for their fantastic partnership. Thank you again. As the United States Ambassador and President Trump's representative in Portugal, my priorities are clear. First and foremost is the protection of all U.S. citizens. Second is to strengthen their defense cooperation, balance the trade, and counter influence, malign influence from China and elsewhere. Today's discussion on subsea cables hits all four of those. This critical connection, subsea cables, is a perfect metaphor for the U.S.-Portuguese relations. It's deep, it's enduring, and it's vital to our future. Here's what most people don't realize, and I know I didn't when I started this job. These cables are barely wider than a garden hose, carry 95% of the world's data traffic. Every email you send, every purchase that my wife does on her visa, according to the English, every Instagram scroll travels through this from its landing station in the United States all the way across the Atlantic and to Portugal through the size of a garden hose. We're talking about trillions of dollars in daily financial transactions. So when that same wife taps her card in Lisbon, that authorization likely crosses the Atlantic twice in just milliseconds. This infrastructure drives real economic growth. Microsoft's $10 billion investment in Portugal, that's being secure by high-speed connectivity. Subcom's Nuvem cable, almost completed here, enables the kind of confidence U.S. and Taiwanese companies lead globally because they take security seriously and they won't trust their sensitive data to untrusted suppliers. As Portugal is blessed with extraordinary geography, 75% of the Atlantic cables cross through Portuguese waters. 1/4 of all global subsea cables connect through Portugal. That makes Portugal key to Europe's, and what I would argue, the world's, digital economy. But here's the critical point. We must exclude untrusted vendors to this supply chain, digital economy, period. What companies or countries save by using them today, they lose in the long term. They lock themselves in conditions that sacrifice innovation and their reputation as a secure connection point. Bad actors can monitor communications, steal intellectual property, and disrupt data flows. Let me give you an example. When Huawei Marine, a Chinese company, installed cables, multiple countries discovered backdoors that allowed surveillance and information to be leaked. That's not theoretical. that's documented. It actually happens. The malign activity doesn't stop there. About 200 incidents happen each year that impact 600 global subsea cables. Some are accidents with fishing nets or earthquakes, but some are very, very intentional. For example, in 2023, a Chinese vessel deliberately dragged its anchor across the Baltic Sea cables, cutting connections between Finland and Estonia. A single incident can cost billions of dollars. Out at sea, it's not easy to hold bad actors accountable. That's why I'm grateful for Rear Admiral Nuno Bragança to discuss Portugal's work securing these waters, and Dr. Kenny Huang to share Taiwanese expertise. Taiwan, like the United States, holds bad actors accountable. Data flowing across subsea cables is only as secure as the infrastructure that surrounds them. Portugal is positioning itself as Europe's digital hub. Google and Meta want to establish data centers, creating high-paying jobs and driving innovation. But this only works with a secure infrastructure and a broader economic security. Just as Portugal invests in research security, it cannot compromise communications infrastructure. Putting in place a strong investment screening system that protects infrastructure, that speeds up permits for trusted suppliers is key. This will make Portugal more attractive to investors, boost resilience, and support growth and innovation. And because Portugal is such a key partner and ally to the United States, these are the priorities that my team and I focus each and every day. I'm pleased Olivia Negus from the Information Technology Industry Council is here to help understand what's at stake technically, something I know I cannot do. But let's have an open discussion that leaves us smarter, more secure, and prepared to do business for years to come. That's my goal, to make America and our allies safer, stronger, and more prosperous. Muito obrigado. Have a great night.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Vitor Matos. I'm a journalist from Jornal Expresso, and I thank the invitation in behalf of the newspaper and in behalf of myself. And thank you for the presentation of Michael and Mr. Ambassador, who gave a lot of information that I had prepared some little context. It's already done. Thank you for alleviating me. This is a subject, a discussion about something that no one can see. So it's important for us to shed some light in the issue and try to see if we can see more about these undersea cables. Make them a little bit more visible. So we have with us some of the best people that know about this issue, that has a lot of economic relevance, as the ambassador said. We have now a data center here in Portugal who caused a huge political problem that had nothing to do with the cables or with the data center. That's another problem, internal problem here in Portugal. But this is really necessary to keep our societies working. It's necessary to maintain the sovereignty and the safety of these infrastructures. And this implies the capacity to defend against malicious actors. And that's why in 2025, the Portuguese Navy monitored 69 Russian ships and conducted 373 monitoring operations on Russian ships and on the Russian Ghost Fleet. And one of these ships, at least twice in 2025, was the supposedly scientific vessel Yantar, which is, I guess, very known by people who study these issues. We suspected of the deployment of small submarines like the Guji mini-submarines that the British have identified last week. Michael already told about the the British interference. But here in Portugal, last week, on the last days, the Internal Security Annual Report, for the acronym RASI in Portuguese, they identified the threat from Russia to these infrastructures as one of the key issues for Portuguese security, which is not only a Portuguese issue, but an international and transnational issue. To analyze these topics, we have these experts whom I will briefly introduce because they have very rich and extensive resumes. So I'd say we have Dr. Kenny Huang from Taiwan. He's involved in shaping global internet governance policies. He's also board chair of TWNIC. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Taiwan Network Information Center, whose goal is global, stable, and secure internet. And among other things, he's also chief of the Executive Council of APNIC, it's APNIC,
Yes.
Asia Pacific Network Information Center in Australia. And very important for today's discussion, is member of the Presidential Office All Society Defense Resilience Committee. Olivia Negus, here next to me, she's American.
Yes.
She comes from the ITI, Information Technology Industry Council, where she's director of the Policy, Trust Data, and Technology Policy Team. And she's an expert on AI policies and risk-based technology. That's right?
And
among other things. And before joining ITI, Olivia served in the United States Department as an international digital policy advisor, where she led the bureaus of European digital policy portfolio. And we also have Rear Admiral Nuno Noronha de Bragança, who is coordinator of the Atlantic Center. And he has a long career in the Portuguese Navy. He was also a military advisor to the President of the Republic, Jorge Sampaio, and military advisor in the Defense Committee of the Portuguese Parliament and Chief of Staff of the Chief of the Navy. That's where we saw ourselves last time in Angola.
In Angola.
So let's begin our conversation. I would start with Dr. Kenny Huang, just because he was the one who traveled the furthest. I think it was nice. And I know you have a presentation, but I'd like just to pose a question. I think that you see some strategic parallels between Taiwan and Portugal. And I'd like to know if you could start also to explaining us how do you see this strategic mirroring between these two countries? Because you have your, let's say, enemy is very close. You have a strait, and Portugal doesn't have that, and have a huge and large ocean in front of us.
Okay, right. Thank you. And Kenny Huang, it's my honor to be here. And thank you for your invitation, Ambassador, as well. And basically, I do a slide. Do I use a slide or just a response to question first?
No, you can make your presentation and
Okay,
respond and answer
so
the
your
questions.
question already covered in my presentation,
can-
so that will be easier. How to activate a slide? Okay, right. It's full screen. Okay, right. It's good. Today's topic actually talking about any critical underwater infrastructure and how we're going to protect the critical underwater infrastructure. This topic basically is almost invisible to a majority of people, but it's critically important to everyone. As Ambassador just mentioned, all the submarine cable carry 95% of the internet traffic. But none of us pay very little bit attention to how we protect the submarine cable. So we bring this topic to discussion. And I try to separate a straight distribution. I have 5 minutes. I probably use 5 minutes for one slide only. Okay. Basically, based on a straight distribution model, I assume that will be a random distribution. Based on straight distribution, we can simply identify at least two kinds of threat. The first kind of threat will be a common threat that's happen almost day to day, and it happen every day. So for that kind of common threat, we can easily to identify the common threat. For example, I may fall asleep, I may have a car accident, that could be considered a common threat. And how we mitigate that kind of common threat? We allocate a budget, identify a standard operating procedure, adopt commercial available software or hardware or any commercial available merchandise to mitigate that kind of threat. So that will be in the central part. So how much threat we try to protect? We can try to define the 100% protection scope for everything. But it's technically not viable and financially not viable because we are not as resource as much. We can protect everything. And to some extent, we got to do some decision to consider sacrifice some of key issue. For example, like in the right-hand side or left-hand side, there will be a disaster situation. How we define the common threat in terms of Taiwan, I just took one example based on the national cybersecurity policy, and any incident happen and should be recovered within 36 hours. So based on the definition, I can easily calculate the standard distribution for the risk distribution will be 2.886. That's less than 3 standard deviation. That means we aggregate our entire resource, the public sector resource, to defend the 90% of the threat that commonly happen every day. So that's what we do, try to eliminate the common threat. But it doesn't mean the disaster situation never happen. It could be happen, for example, 100 years, 200 years, next week, nobody knows. But it happened. Just not as often as a common threat. But we still need to have a plan. I didn't say we need to have solution. We do need a plan to mitigate that kind of anything happen in a disaster. So for example, for common threat, actually most of the solution will be budget conscious solution because it happens every day. You got to be careful for your budget. But for disaster, basically, that will be profound deficit in security response resource because during the disaster, all the resources are running out quickly in terms of financial, in terms of human capital, in terms of your time actually running out. You only have very, very selective resource available on your hand. So you got to be very careful what you're trying to protect. You only can protect something most valuable for you. In the meantime, you also need to define what you need to sacrifice. Okay, before I came here, I just realized actually Taiwan and Portugal are quite similar in terms of cyberspace. For example, Portugal was considered a digital hub between US and Europe. And Taiwan also considered as a digital hub between Asia and US. So which means anything goes wrong in the digital hub would jeopardize US and Europe and Asia as well. So in terms of emergence rate, of course, Portugal doesn't have a physical emergence rate, but Taiwan does. But in terms of the topology, basically that kind of topology that's a potential, accumulated potential natural threat because we are a digital hub. We have the concentration risk by ourselves because we create a single point of value by two states, by United States and Europe. Anything goes wrong in Portugal will jeopardize not only state, but also jeopardize Europe. So we need to care for how we can secure the digital hub at the same time. So when I consider today's topic, it's very difficult to identify potential risk because it's almost invisible for everyone, and especially everything under the water. I quickly go through that. I just take example as Taiwan. For example, how we protect anything under the water. First, we need to identify which part of water you're talking about. You're talking about your territory water, or you're talking about exclusive economic zone, or you're talking about a high sea. Because different location has different jurisdiction, has a different regulation, has a different resource, has a different technology, and also different stakeholder as well. So we need to partition and conquer. Which part we're going to solve first? Of course, territory water will be most easier part. So we try to solve the territory water by ourselves, as many as possible. We define, impose a strict regulation, domestic telecommunication regulation, and we try to enhance intergovernmental coordination, and coordinate with the Coast Guard, and coordinate with the Navy, and coordinate with the telecommunication operator as well. So we try our best to mobilize all the public-private partnership within the territory water. But that's it. Nothing we can do in the EEZ, nothing we can do in the international water. It's very, very hard for us. Not to mention about regulation, UN law of sea doesn't help. And international territory water, actually, international water is too broad. Probably we can come up with some good idea how we can protect international water. And not to mention, sorry, I forgot to mention, the subsea cable could be not only for commercial use, could be for military use. It's perfect technology for dual use technology. So that means if anything goes wrong in the subsea cable, that means you are not only lose the communication to the internet, you also lose your command line of control with entire military. So the potential option would be we try to maximize the option. For example, everything we rely on subsea cable. Do we have possibility to go to the sky? Yes. No, I couldn't say yes. Yes, that option is available. We could go to the low orbit satellite. We can go to the geo satellite, but the capacity is very, very limited. So back to my original narrative, we got to make some decision. We got to decide what we're going to sacrifice, because we think that 1% or 0.1% of capacity we think of the submarine cable in the sky. What are you going to fully utilize the 1% of traffic? So that's our internal policy. Need to digest, need to figure out how we can utilize the 1% of traffic. And also the framework for global cooperation, we need to identify a harmonized legal framework, probably not legal framework because the international law doesn't move anyway. Probably we identify the good way of practice, international practice as well. And also regional repair consortium and global resilience protocol. Can we identify global resilience protocol? And no single state can secure the seabed because seabed is too big, too broad, and too complicated. Anything under the seabed was invisible. Anything in the seabed will be potential threat. The threat can be from very calm to be very, very aggressive in a short period of time. So our enemy, they have a strong investment in the seabed. They have a huge technology. They have a manned vessel, a manned submarine can dive into the 1,000 meter depth, and they have a disabled cable cutter until the 4 kilometer depth. We don't have that kind of technology. We don't have that kind of monitoring mechanism. We couldn't stop that from happening. So we have today's dialogue. We hope to, starting from this dialogue, we can figure out some way we're looking forward for the next step. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Olivia, Negus, infrastructures are transnational, as you've seen, and cooperation is very important. Submarine cables require strong international cooperation, not only between nations, but between private sector, state, and industry. So can you tell us a little bit more about that? I think you have also a presentation.
Yes.
To Mike, okay.
Yes, of course. Yeah, happy to touch on that. I think that's a really great point.
All right, it's okay, right?
Did the microphone go out?
Yeah,
or?
it's okay.
It's
I
okay.
guess now it's okay.
This is a space that requires very strong international coordination as well as collaboration between industry and government. So happy to touch on that. It's really great to, is it going in and out? Or?
I guess it's okay. Let me see. Just here. Yeah. Try it.
Okay. I think it's okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. It's really great to be here with everyone this evening, and thank you so much to the event organizers, FLAD, and our U.S. Embassy in Lisbon for having me. Thank you to the ambassador for your opening remarks, as well as Vitor for your welcome too. As you mentioned, Director for Global Telecommunications Policy at the Information Technology Industry Council, or ITI, as we like to call it. If you're not familiar with the concept of it, I'm afraid it keeps...
I guess it's better if someone from the technical, or maybe the microphone, bringing the microphone. This is a problem with the upper sea cables.
Yeah.
Upper land cables, more correctly.
Okay. We're getting a microphone.
Okay. It's on? Okay. All right, so where were we?
The Information Technology Industry Council, or ITI, if you're not familiar with the concept of an industry association, we represent and do policy advocacy on behalf of our 80 member companies across the ICT ecosystem. In terms of the relevance for today's discussion, we count among our members the major US hyperscale cloud companies and content providers that are increasingly building and owning undersea cable infrastructure, as well as becoming investors in Portugal. And so to center today's discussion, we've already heard a little bit about the statistics and the importance of this infrastructure, but essentially undersea cables are the backbone of our modern internet infrastructure, and they're essential for facilitating global data flows and delivering digital services across the world. As you mentioned, because almost all undersea cables link one country to another, this is a place that does really require strong international coordination and dialogue between government and industry. I'm really excited to be having this discussion with my fellow panelists because I think the United States, Portugal, and Taiwan all have a really unique and important role to play in this policy space. The United States is home to the companies that are building a lot of this infrastructure and driving demand for this infrastructure. Portugal is also seeing a lot of investment in this space and becoming a transatlantic digital hub, as well as a critical connection point between Europe and Africa. Taiwan also has a lot to offer in this area. I like Dr. Huang's framing of it as the Asia-Pacific digital hub, and they have lots of great experience to share on how to promote security and resilience in this area. So from industry's perspective, we want to work together with policymakers to support undersea cable security and resilience and support policymakers' national security and economic security goals. We believe that the best way to support these goals and increase undersea cable security and resilience is simply by having more undersea cables. If we have greater cable redundancy, then this reduces the risk from any single cable disruption. So how do we actually do this or accomplish this? The best way to increase cable deployments is by having a regulatory system for licensing and permitting that is stable, that's consistent, and has clear and predictable timelines. Things that we typically advocate for with governments are having mechanisms such as a one-stop shop or a fast track to support repeat or trusted companies as applicants, like the ambassador highlighted. We also think having a regulatory system that supports good spatial planning, route diversity, and treats cables as environmentally benign is also key. Beyond this, good governance in the protection of undersea cables is also key to helping reduce systemic risk. We do know that around 70% of cable incidents, again, as Dr. Huang highlighted, are accidental from things like anchor drags or fishing vessel incidents. So we need good policy practices in place to help reduce these incidents. So what does that look like? These are things like having secure anchor protocols, having training for fishing vessel crew on awareness of cable routes or what to do when their equipment may snag on a cable, requiring the use of vessel tracking systems, and having strong enforcement regimes with penalties in place to encourage compliance with these type of practices. If we can promote good policy in this space, then we can reduce the gray zone in which malicious actors can operate. Good policy for rapid repair when there is a cable disruption is also key. We support the ICPC's or the International Cable Protection Committee's recommendations in this regard, such as discouraging cabotage laws that require domestic crew or domestic vessels for cable repair, port entry, or visa requirements for vessels or crew, or any sort of associated duties and fees. Ultimately, we believe that good policy practices for the deployment, protection, and rapid repair of undersea cables are essential to promote cable resilience and security. Good governance in this space can promote innovation and investment, reduce the gray zone in which malicious actors can operate, support deterrence, and reduce the risk from cable disruptions.
I think that the United States, Portugal, and Taiwan have the potential for a great partnership in this area, and really looking forward to the rest of our discussion tonight. Thank you. And
Thank you,
sorry for the
Olivia.
mic issues.
For your first remarks.
Yeah.
Admiral, now from the perspective of the collective defense and security perspective, things have changed, and I'd like to know if you could describe us what are today's the biggest threats to these underwater infrastructures, and how they have changed recently. I believe this happened after the invasion of Ukraine. I believe that Russia started its malicious activity in this area, or maybe we became more closer. We pay closer attention now than we paid before. I don't know. And if you can address also the Portuguese case, which is very different from the Baltics, because a series of reasons, but also because of the deep of the sea, which is not the same thing. Please.
Thank you, Victor. And first of all, thank you, Ambassador, for the invitation. Thank you, Vlad, too. And thank you to the colleagues of the panel, because I already take a lot of notes, so I'm learning a lot in this afternoon. As you can see, I have two watches, a smart one and an old-fashioned one. This is resilience. If I can say, and I can bring this is resilience. Victor, let me start about one thing, geography. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, we are talking a lot about geography because of the conflictuality that we have at this moment, and we talk a lot about choke points, and I think we need to look also to the seabed in the geography perspective. And as you say, Victor, there are some differences. There are some differences. The challenge is there, as professors say, the common challenge is there. But if you look and we talk about the Baltics, we can start in 2014 with the Crimea invasion, where one of the first things was to cut the communications with Ukraine. And sometimes we forget that. But of course, the territorial sea in the Baltic, the average depth of that is 62 meters. And sorry, because I'm a Navy guy, 62 meters is more or less something that I touch the seabed with my fingers and my hand. And so it's really important for sustainable development, for investment, but bring another challenge. Another example is, for instance, the North Sea, where the average depth is 110 meters. And because of that, we have the wind offshore platforms, that's called the wind farms in platforms. We have ducts of energy. We have subcables, but 110 meters. It's a little bit difficult, but I can touch it. But, and Professor, you if you can probably see if I'm correct or not, but in the Strait of Taiwan, the average depth is 60 meters. And with that, I want to say and highlight how the risk is important when we are looking for this. And of course, when we talk about Portugal, the average depth of the territorial waters is 1,200 meters. And we have this geography that the sea comes up nearby the coast. And it is an advantage, of course, and allowed us, in the first step, focus on the land station, on the approach of the cables to sea. And we know for sure, and because the Atlantic Center look more than subcables, and all this common challenge that how this flux, how the shoreline became insignificant when this transnational insecurity flux go by land and sea. That is one of the points I would like to highlight. Then we can say, well, Portugal is far away for have risks. No. And you already said, Portugal is investing a lot on security, of course on safety, but on security, not only regarding the subcables, but also the subcables, increasing in maritime domain awareness. But if I can say, sometimes we talk in maritime domain awareness, someone talk about not, I think it was you, Kenny, you talk about not blindness, but something like blindness. Some years ago, we looked for the sea, and it's really far away from our heart, so it's a kind of blindness that we see it. But now we increase a lot the maritime domain awareness regarding surface, but we continue to invest in, if I can say, underwater domain awareness. And that is, for me, one of the things that technology could help and support us on that. I think we improve a lot. A good example is the very new constellations of satellite that Portugal by the Air Force released for the space that will allow, with the synthetic aperture radars in the satellites, to improve this knowledge, this awareness, and also to at least put attention on the areas that we identify as criticals regarding subcables. Only to say, I'm looking more in a strategic point of view. I don't go and deep inside of technology, of technologies, because I'm not really an expert of, I'm not an engineer, but anyway, it's something that we need to. Governance is very important, and one of the things that could support this is marine space planning. Regarding, we have a large area of sovereignty, of jurisdiction, and if we extend our continental shelf, it will be, for sure, more demanding regarding that. So, if I can join two more topics regarding that, I think you already mentioned, Vitor, the increased numbers and the figures regarding the assets from Russia, from China that cross, namely the EEZ of Portugal. Regarding the scientific or researchers' assets, they need to have a permission, namely when they come to the territorial sea, and when they cross the EEZ, they need to inform they will cross that. Sometimes they don't. And because of that, we need to have this in mind, that we continue to increase maritime domain awareness. I will always say that with that, we need to have, I'm sorry, this expression, presence, deterrence. Mm-hmm. And how can we get that deterrence in that presence? Not only by navies, by frigates or by OPVs or by submarines. We have the technology with us, and Portugal made a lot on that, namely the robotic experimentation and prototype maritime unmanned system exercise that we make every year in Portugal. Well, we bring, and that I think another important thing, academia, private sector, public sector, and also civil and military agencies that work and need to work together regarding this. So it's very brief, a very pitch regarding this. Is the first words, but Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Admiral. Dr. Kenny Huang, everything we're talking about is invisible, abstract, with this blindness that Admiral talked. That's why the Russians are mapping or trying to map the cables here, like down to the millimeter. The other day I was talking with a high official from the Navy, and he told, oh, everybody knows where more or less are the cables, but they want to know exactly to the millimeter where they are. And you talk about gray zones and the risks about that. Can you explain us this concept?
Okay, I should probably correct. Today, we're talking about invisible. Actually, it's based on today's situation. It's almost invisible.
Almost invisible.
But with the technology availability and the cost down of the technology, for example, talking about maritime awareness. So far in Taiwan, our maritime awareness is less than 5% today, but could be probably next year, could be 10% or 20%. And once we increase the maritime domain awareness, I think that will help because you make invisible more, a little bit transparent, a little bit. But still, we're still looking for, not only looking for the data, but looking for deterrence measure. For example, what kind of deterrence you have? Probably you have a manned vessel try to do the deterrence. And we also need to think of more innovative way in addition to Navy. Probably we can consider is there any other way we can improve the deterrence because you know the location, you know the detailed information, that's one thing, but there are several things need to be done. For example, once you know what happened, can you identify who should be accountable for that consequence? So cyber attribution we need to identify. We need to identify cyber attribution, make sure that kind of data can convert to evidence, and make sure the evidence can be put in international court or put in some jurisdiction we can enforce. They put it into the jail, put it into the penalty. Otherwise, without a jurisdiction, there's no penalty. Without even you define the penalty, it's useless. So we need to have a cyber attribution and identify the location, create a maritime domain awareness as well. And meanwhile, also need to understand what your enemy is doing. As I mentioned, China, Russia, they identify seabed as a strategic domain for long-term national competition. And they have identified several strategic domains. China identified seabed will be strategic domain, outer space will be strategic domain, cyberspace will be, and also polar region is a strategic domain. So once the strategic domain has been identified, they will mobilize all the national resource to strengthen their competition in that particular strategic domain. That's what I mentioned. They have different kind of technology, different kind of usage, try to do starting from very scientific research, but they have a lot of underwater infrastructure, underwater data, underwater expertise, underwater operation. That kind of infrastructure, data, operation, and expertise can be easily repurposed to become strategic operation. So because it's the same infrastructure, it's the same data, it's the same expertise, no difference. So we also need to be aware that kind of military civil fusion strategy, because that could not only happen to damage your infrastructure, that could happen to damage your national security as well. So yes, starting from the first step, we need to identify the data. We need to make sure we have more data, make it more visible instead of today it's quite invisible. So looking for more affordable technology, deploy more affordable technology, advanced technology, and also identify potential deterrence measure, and also identify what would be the national strategy to defend on any particular strategic domain we haven't defined yet.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you so much. Olivia, there's a question when I guess you work on this area. We're talking about multiple countries, and how should the regulatory environment be harmonized to enhance the resilience and the cooperation between countries to make all these better? Yeah, please.
Yeah, that's a great question.
It's no, it doesn't have the cable. I guess that's the problem.
Do you want to go there?
Okay,
Do you want to go there?
They're turning it on.
it's okay now? Okay.
Okay, maybe by the last question, we'll get this right with the microphone. Yeah, I think that's a really critical aspect of this equation and what a lot of industry is really focused on, how we can get the regulatory system for licensing and permitting right in this space. And another thing that we've already talked about today is how we can promote trusted vendors across this ecosystem. So I want to talk a little bit about that too. So in my opening remarks, I talked about some of the mechanisms or practices that we try to encourage governments to take to put good policy practices in place in this space. Things like one-stop shops or fast-track systems for trusted and repeat applicants. Right now in the United States, our telecom regulator, the Federal Communications Commission, or FCC, is going through the process of updating their undersea cable rules and regulations, and this is one of the things that we're advocating for with them. We want to promote a fast-track system that allows the FCC to not have to look at a single company each time it files an application for a cable license, but instead spends their resources looking at the unique aspects of each cable system. And with that, we hope that there can be more efficiency in terms of processing these applications so we can get more cables deployed faster. I understand here in Portugal, the telecom regulator, ANACOM, is also looking at some similar measures, has been working on implementing a one-stop shop, as well as supporting streamlined permitting for strategic projects. So I think that that's also a really key development. Typically for industry, we look at Singapore as a model for best practices. Their telecom regulator, IMDA, has a really good system in place where they also serve as a one-stop shop for companies that are filing applications for cable landings, and the company receives a license themselves, and then once they have that license, basically all of their applications are filed underneath that, which helps really expedite the process. And so I mentioned earlier as well that I think that the United States, Portugal, and Taiwan all have a really important role to play in promoting regulatory alignment. I think there are lots of different places where it's critical for this coordination to occur. Another thing that can really be an issue in this space, again, as I mentioned, almost all undersea cables connect one country to another. So when you're talking about building out a cable system, you're dealing with not one, but two governments, and often not just the federal government, but the local level governments on both sides as well. So the more help the industry can get from federal governments to kind of align and coordinate all of the different governmental levels in the licensing and permitting process is something that's really key for industry. I also think that governments being aligned internally and working within multilateral organizations is really crucial. The protection of this infrastructure has lots of components that spans across a lot of different international organizations, and that can mean working in spaces that you don't necessarily associate with technology infrastructure like the International Maritime Organization. So we really encourage governments to think about all different aspects of this. And then I think one last point that I would touch on is that it's really great to see that like-minded partners are having more discussions about how to promote and protect this infrastructure, but this is global infrastructure, so I would also really encourage actors like the United States, Portugal, and Taiwan to be having conversations with other countries around the world. Some places that might have kind of a less sophisticated regulatory framework or less understanding of these issues, to make sure that we are working on supporting a healthy technology ecosystem globally.
Okay, thank you. Admiral, and now, what are the main challenges in detecting the menaces and protecting these infrastructures? And I'd like to know, if here in Portugal, our navy is we have a huge sea, but not a huge navy, and our Air Force also works on this. And you told about the Constellation project that Portugal now have. Does Portugal can really protect, to guarantee to protect these infrastructures? And how to do it?
Yeah, Victor, thank you. That is this, I think, in my opinion, one of the good things is the cooperation and collaboration. Portugal is part of NATO, of European Union, and also using these alliances and this framework of countries, we can, of course, increase our capacity and, of course, go through this factor. As can you say, one thing that I really think it's important to make it clear. High sea, it's something very challenging. And for that, we need another thing. It is a busy word, is resilience. And resilience, and we have to understand when need to act not only for deter, to detect, but also to delay. What I say with delay is to have a resilient system that allowed us to rerouting, and we see the example of the Baltic regarding, it was the rerouting capacity that allowed Baltic to maintain the low latency and not lost packets of service. So I think this is one thing we need to have in mind and see the investments that the Nordic countries and Canada is already doing in the Arctic side to avoid it choke points, to avoid it conflict zones, to avoid risk zones. How Portugal is doing this is, as I say, manage investing, for instance, in also not the assets of navies, frigates, so, but use also the technology. And for instance, we have now in Portugal in the private sector, two enterprises that they are really work a lot with us. That is, I'm talking about Takever, and I'm talking about the new one, U-Force, that I think Kenny already know it. That, for instance, we have USVs, surface vehicles, unmanned surface vehicles, with an endurance that allowed us to go from here to Madeira and make this permanent position to increase our own awareness. I always say, and I give an example, as a principle of citizen behavior, we like to all to have a police with us, we are sure we are secure. But we need to look to increase maritime domain awareness, as usual, but we cannot fall in that stage that we have. We are seeing the things happening and following in the, sorry to use this word, in a reality show that we are seeing everything happening, but we cannot act and we cannot actuate directly in the situation that we are seeing. Saying this, add only one thing that was already mentioned is how can we, in a very clear way, to use the international law regarding these issues. How can we look and see and debate and discuss this? I know to change at this moment the UNCLOS, it will be very difficult. The moment the context, in my opinion, I don't recommend that, but we can, using other bodies, like we say, and for that, it's important that Portugal is present in that bodies. And that is a way also to improve security. And we see we are in the committee of the resilience of critical infrastructures. We are in the center of critical underwater infrastructures in NATO. So being present on these international infrastructures is also a way to reinforce the security of this space.
Okay. Let's just make a quick round, then to have questions from the audience. And now I'd like you to be as fast as you can. So, Dr. Ken Young, to avoid disruptions, how should we establish redundant ecosystems? And I'd like to know if you could speak about the Taiwan experience, because you have a lot of incidents, but you're not sure if they are caused directly by China. I guess there was a captain of a fisherman boat that was condemned, but there are no more cases in the justice.
Okay, talking about some case happening in Taiwan we do have a lot of incident, what I say incident instead of gray zone aggression, because we don't have evidence whether it's a gray zone or not. But basically, some of the case, we try to create multiple redundant, for example, like between Taiwan and island nearby Taiwan, Jinmen, Matu, Penghu, we have at least one primary connection and one backup connection at least, and one for contingency connection. So with the three sea cable, make sure we have sufficient redundant under the sea cable. And in addition to subsea cable, we also have 3 microwave, one primary microwave, a secondary backup microwave, and contingency use microwave. And in terms of satellite between Taiwan and the island nearby Taiwan, we have a geo satellite, and we have mid-range satellite operation, and also we have low orbit satellite operation as well. So we call it a 3x3 redundant. But actually the primary communication only one channel. So in terms of one channel, we create 9 redundancy. This cost is tremendous cost. But luckily, because of the island and Taiwan still within the physical limitance, physical distance, so we still can apply multiple technology to leverage that kind of redundancy. But it's very difficult if the distance is too far away, for example, between Taiwan and state. And sea cable and satellite will be the only 2 options available, and not to mention about the capacity quite different. So we're still looking for multiple redundant, as many as possible, along with the advance of the technology, along with the maturity of the technology. We try to consider different options, try to not stick into one single option, because any single option will create concentration vulnerability.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Olivia, we're talking about deterrence and defense, but there's another fundamental aspect that is the maintenance and repair of the damaged cables. Can you address that issue, please?
Yeah, of course, happy to. I think, this is a critical part of the discussion because, maintenance is critical for keeping these systems online and functioning properly, and having rapid repair capabilities is really critical when there actually is a disruption to get services back online. As I talked about before, having good policy practices in this space is really key. I think that there is this kind of ongoing debate between policy and policymakers and industry in terms of the importance of repair vessel capacity. Obviously, this is an issue that we do think is really important, but we also want to emphasize that policy in this space is really critical too. Because from our point of view, it doesn't necessarily matter how many vessels you have if they can't get to the points of repair that they need to quickly, because there are things like cabotage laws in place that I mentioned earlier, or these requirements that have repair vessels go into port or have their crew get visas before they can actually do a repair in a particular country's territorial waters. So I think making sure to address those policy issues and have good practices in that space is really key.
Okay, thank you. Admiral, it's a personal doubt. I didn't search about this. I don't have a conclusion because you told me that there are some opinions about it. Is there any possibility of collecting data if you get near to a cable? I guess this would be an interesting question to address. And if there is any kind of suspicions that malicious actors can deliver like roves that are under the sea waiting for an order to cut or damage sea cable, and how can we defend ourselves from that?
Thank you. To tap soup cables and extract data, probably Professor is more well informed regarding that. But saying this, the level of terabytes and the level of the flux of data that you have, to extract this, you need to have a very particular condition on board that I don't say if it exists, but is very demanding. Mm-hmm. This is one thing. So when we have the first debate about soup cables in 2022, and we joined the private and public sector, the armed forces, the agencies involved on this, that was one of the questions that we raised in 2022. And the private sector, because the owners of the cable at this moment, if I can say 90%, 90 or more than that, are coming from private sector. They say, well, until now, we don't have evidence regarding that. The other thing is to have dormant roles at the Subsea. If we have already the capacity and endurance to have underwater unmanned vehicles, and see the example last year from UK, already an enterprise that have already some of these vehicles operating for almost 30 days around the critical zones to make some surveillance in the area. And we need to understand what is the sea, the dynamic of the ocean, the condition, and the complexity to operate on that environment. So that's one. So, but if you allow me, I would like to conclude in a certain way what we have done here and say, first of all, to create this awareness regarding the soup cables and saying that it's quite easy to innovate in technology. It's quite difficult to innovate the citizen behavior. It's much more demanding. And we see this, for instance, I gave you an example in the Global Maritime Security Conference in Abuja in 2019, when we talk about to use technology regarding evidence in illicit activities at sea. And the prosecutors raised their hands and said, okay, it's very interesting, very good, but regarding our legal framework, it will be difficult to use that evidence collected by technology. And that is how technology is always a step away from our mindset. Another one is really learn and adapt. When we talk about resilience, resilience is something in the physics of the materials, is something that after a stress return to the same position. We don't want to return to the same position. We want to, return to the normal position, but learn and adapt. And we see that in Ukraine, how they do and move fast regarding that.
Well, I think it's the cables that can detect...
That is another thing that I would like to talk is smart cables. We'll have a smart cable in Portugal, the CAM, that connect Açores, Madeira, and the continent. But smart cables bring also another challenge. And we need to take attention how are we going to deliver the data that is collected by smart cables. It's not a problem. It's solved. Other countries already do that. But I think we need to understand it's something that is ongoing. It's a regulatory process, very important to do it. And that allowed us to sensors that are placed 50 kilometers or 100 kilometers, and is a long sonar. So you have this, all the perception of the movement, and a lot of information that we can get it for that, namely for seismic side, environmental size, temperature, and other data that are really important for scientists. But we need to, we talk a lot about digital sovereignty, we need to understand that also touch sovereignty of the country. So it's something, and final point, the involvement of civil society. In this room, there are a very good example of Portugal that it is the involvement of civil society. It's the observatorio that is also helping the governance and the dialogue between policymakers and civil society, not only the private sector, but also civil society involved in that. At the final is the governance is by decide what is the final point. But thank you, Peter.
Thanks so much. Now, I think, I don't know if you want to add anything before the questions.
I'll maybe just comment to build off of your points. I think this discussion around smart cables and sensing cables is something that's really interesting, and I just agree with you there that it's definitely still an emerging and evolving area, and from industry's point of view, we want to make sure that governments aren't being too prescriptive yet in terms of how they're approaching this. And I do think that there's some challenges as well with these capabilities. Does it potentially make these cables more of an asset to be targeted? And also, I've talked a lot about the challenges with licensing and permitting, and from industry's point of view, we do wonder sometimes, is this going to make that process even more challenging as two countries are trying to cooperate to figure out how they can, approve a system with that type of technology. So I think that this is a very interesting part of the discussion to continue to have amongst all of the relevant parties and watch how this space develops.
Questions from the audience? I don't know if if the microphone is this or is another one?
Yeah, did I? I took the question microphone.
I guess the microphone is
I
coming.
think they're getting another, yeah.
It's here.
That's mine.
Hello. Yes, thank you. Thank you for the panel and for everybody here. We were talking about what you guys mentioned, redundancies, resilience, satellites, surveillance, and everything. And I was thinking about Starlink and their launches. I think they're launching 2 per week, and they have currently 10,000 satellites in orbit. The target is 40,000, I think. And the question is, would this solve this problem by going around everything we're talking about here? And does this have a connection of who's going to surveil it or protect it somehow? And is this related to the US capacity through the US Space Force? So I don't know if you can discuss a little bit about
This
that.
question is for anyone in special? Or?
No, in general, but I guess this is more for Olivia. I don't know if...
Okay.
Sure. Yeah, I think we've touched on this already a little bit with Dr. Huang's comments in terms of the role that LEO can play in forming some sort of backup system or helping with redundancy. I do think that this is a really critical piece when we do have situations in which there are disruptions in a place like Taiwan, but I think Dr. Huang mentioned this as well. Right now, in terms of what we're seeing from LEO, it just does not have the same capacity and speed as undersea cables. It simply cannot handle the same amount of data that we're putting through the undersea cable systems. And so while it does play a critical role when we would need to address situations like making sure emergency medical services perhaps are online, it wouldn't be able to kind of provide an entire backup system for the role that undersea cables play, but I do think it'll be really interesting to see how the capacity and technology for these type of systems are able to develop. But I would love to hear your perspective as well.
Okay, right, thank you. Basically, from this entire process, what we learned is divide and conquer. How we divide and conquer, well, I wouldn't say conquer, just mitigate these issues. We haven't conquered yet. We are far from conquer. But basically, we separate civil communication versus military communication. That's two sets. We don't discuss military communication. Communication system also divide into 4 elements. The first element was primary communication. Second element will be alternate communication. Third element will be PAC, contingency communication system. The last one will be disaster communication system. Once all the piece has been identified, you can prioritize who are you going to put it into what particular location. If you use a Skylink, you probably worry about sovereignty issue. Not only Skylink, any kind of satellite, you will worry about sovereignty issue because it usually covers a lot of different states provided by international operator, and even the majority, the major shareholder could be any special preference for any particular state. That will change the policy determination. So we definitely will not consider for put it in the primary communication system. The primary still go to the sea cable. Put it into the backup, yes, fine, for civil communication. And put it in the PAC, contingency, yes, contingency and disaster could be okay because disaster, you have nothing to lose. So put it into that kind of priority. That will be determined how you're going to utilize less potential communication system provided by any particular vendor, and that could be a monopoly the market as well. So you got to determine which position you're going to put it. And for military system, they have their own sovereignty, so they design their own system. So I don't comment on military communication system, but for civil system, we prioritize it, these 4 categories. And for the primary category, that's based on, I just mentioned, day-to-day happen a common thread, everything go to the subsea cable. If anything goes wrong, go to the backup, the other alternative backup route. If any goes wrong, go to contingency. Contingency could be satellite. Last one, if you don't have any other choice, go to satellite. Okay, that's it.
Admiral, want to say something about this issue?
Yes, only one point, that is about redundancy and contingency plan, and only to highlight one thing. And sometime we start to put our eggs in only one basket. It was satellite. For instance, some navies start to broadcast when they are at sea using only the satellite asset. And we forgot HF capacity, high frequency capacity. What we have done, for instance, in Portugal, we still have all personnel training and using the HF capacity. And that is really an important issue to deliver because they allowed us to using and communicate in a very important place to maintain the control and the command of the situation. And that is, I think, something that we need to start to think about.
There's another question here. Yes.
Oh, may I? Well, thank you very much. Good afternoon. So I would like to salute and to congratulate FLAD for this wonderful presentation. This is a very great opportunity to think about deep sea connections. I would like also to salute my colleagues, the friends, and congratulate you also for this very good explanation. I just want to take 1 minute to explain and to take also the opportunity to Admiral Nuno Bragança mentioned that we have in Portugal an observatorium. And this observatorium is doing a great job about what can we have to improve, to create more resilience in the sea cables community. So in the last year, we provide one paper for the Portuguese government about 25 measures to increase interconnectivity and to increase the resilience of the sea cables. And for example, some of these points that we mentioned here today, international cooperation, public-private cooperation, technical investments, smart cables technology as a very important issue. We need to discuss this a little bit more. Water survey, global redundance, legislation. Also, we need to have a national connectivity strategy. If you don't know what strategy you have, you never find what you have to do. And we have to think also about national digital interconnectivity and national sea cables reparation capability. This is some small number of topics that our observatory is putting in a paper, and this is something that we need to keep to discussion. And I don't want to talk about cybersecurity. So my question is, what are our countries doing related to the national strategy? Do they think about this? Do they have a national strategy concerning the resilience of the sea cables? And just taking the opportunity of having you in the stage, can you explain something about Taiwan, for example?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, first we should have a national strategy, but we're still waiting for the approval.
Okay, just mention a little bit, because some of them are actually national security. Just a little bit. Basically, we try to, we will put very same situation, we put a cybersecurity as a national strategy, and we identify how to improve the resilience. So we list all the potential options available. For example, how to maximize the redundant from subsea cable. So we dealing with all the international vendor, and some of them suggest your telecommunication regulation is not very friendly. We change it. We change the telecom regulation to welcome foreign investment. And you're talking about you don't have single contact of person, it's difficult to deal with different government agency. Yeah, we create single contact of person. When you go to submarine.tw, you can see the entire information who you should contact with based on what kind of application requirement, what would be eligibility for applicant. So you can understand all the regulation requirement from the very early beginning. And also we try to explore all the different paths in addition to multiple sea cable. Do we have potentials? Yeah, we do have cellular communication. Is it possible we can go to some sort of sky communication? For example, like a drone carry the 5G repeater to reflect the signal. Yes, we have that kind of demonstration next month, starting from next month. And for that kind of facility, we just using for emergency situation, especially like an earthquake or any natural disaster. Our helicopter will carry the 5G stuff, 5G repeater, 5G radio station, go to somewhere, fly on the sky, so that any resident under the fly, they can receive the signal from the sky. And we also explore different approach as well. And that's just to maximize the differences. The other critical part is prioritize the traffic. As I mentioned, if all the sea cable is gone, definitely the existing available tool were not able to tolerate the entire traffic. Say, probably only can have a 5% of traffic. So we define a priority strategy and how we're going to prioritize. Are you going to sacrifice medical care? Are you going to sacrifice energy sector? Are you going to sacrifice government administration data? So, of course, we definitely couldn't say sacrifice, but we do have a priority list. Who should be in the top priority? When the traffic go below 5%, who should be in the priority list? When the traffic go to 1%, who will be in the priority list? And for detail, that will be confidential, sorry. But we define that kind of priority list and also define who should be the stakeholder. For example, we operate DNS-RPZ. So we can trigger the DNS-RPZ to prohibit anyone to access critical application, useless application. I'm going to say useless. It's a very energy-consuming application. For example, like a YouTube, like a TikTok, like a Facebook. During the wartime, we will shut it down immediately. It's national security. So anyway, we try to prioritize that kind of traffic, also manipulate that kind of traffic, make sure only very, very valuable traffic can go to the sky. And also try to separate, make sure all the military communication should be air-gapped, everything should be isolated as well. So that's so far what I can say at this moment. Sorry.
Do you want to say anything?
Yeah, sure, I can comment. Thank you so much for your comments and reflections. It sounds like in the document you touch on a lot of the different themes and recommendations we've made today. So that's really great to hear that there's some alignment in the folks focusing on these issue areas. I guess to your question, I would just say this is the point of why we're doing all of these policy advocacy discussions and talking about best practices, because there are so many different and interconnected pieces, and it's important for in the United States for all of our different government agencies to have awareness in terms of what industry has challenges with, and then for us to be doing the same kind of work internationally. So I do really think it's important to take a strategic approach and make sure to educate and talk about what best policy practices are.
Admiral,
Yeah.
do we have a strategic approach to whatever, to whatever issue?
Let me say one thing. I think we need, all of us, it's not only Portugal, all of us, we need to have a quiz strategy involving all the agencies in the process. And then more than that, we have to have a strategy action factors. And what the current times bring to us is the long snake decision process, as I usually call. It's not more valid at this moment. And we see this, we need to be faster in the decision. We need to faster to adapt our strategy. We can have perfect strategies, and it's good for all of us in the room. It's a good, it's like the anxiety that you will have that when you will cut the Facebook and TikTok and so on. We see that in the shutdown in Portugal. Everybody is looking for the phones. They say, I don't have message, I cannot talk, and start to become some anxiety on this. So we have to have this. It's more rapid decision process, and we don't have a beautiful strategy in the PowerPoint. Is fantastic, but what we need is the capacity to adapt quickly the strategy, and to have the capacity to have actions, concrete actions for that strategy.
Mm-hmm. More questions? Yes, please.
Thank you.
You want to try here?
Yes. Or
I don't think, it's working now. Thank you so much. I wanted to thank all the speakers and moderator for a fascinating discussion on security policy, but I wanted also to address the economic aspect of this. And I have the feeling, I'm not an expert, but I have a feeling that this market or these markets are very concentrated, both in terms of manufacturers, but also the firms that lay the cables undersea. As you said, very challenging to have to operate in the high seas. The number of vessels available to lay the cables. So I'm wondering if this is concentration is a concern for institutions like the ITI, and I see competition on the title of your discussion, and also in terms of having more redundancy. If you want to have more redundancy, the cost of these cables and operators could probably it would probably be nicer if it came down. So I'm more interested in the discussion in economic terms now, if it's possible for you to address that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think that's a really good point and good consideration. Yeah, I think it's interesting to look at what the market dynamics are for this type of technology. I actually think that this space, we do see good diversity in terms of manufacturing companies for this equipment. We have a US company, Subcom, a French company, a Japanese company, and then there is a Chinese company that has some market share, but I think when you compare it to other technology spaces like the 5G space, where we see really strong market dominance from the Chinese company Huawei, we actually have much better diversity here in the undersea cable equipment space with these different firms having greater market share from trusted partner countries. So that's something that I view really positively. And to your point kind of about, I guess, concentration or building redundancy too, I would say, again, this is why we're really encouraging getting the regulatory frameworks right in this space and making sure that we're having those conversations globally, because naturally industry will go to places where it's easier to do business, and we will have less of these issues with over-concentration if it's easier to, build these systems and have landings in different places across the globe and build more diversity in terms of these hubs.
Mm-hmm. Professor Huang, do you want to address this issue?
Oh, yeah, just recap some of the concentration issue. This market actually is really concentrated. Of course, there are several markets also very concentrated, but this market, biggest concern with the national security, even some sort of 20%, 30% is super scaring, because that can cover 30%, 20% of the country in the world. And besides, in addition to market concentration, the other issue is the technical concentration, because as I just mentioned, 95% of the communication goes through the sea cable. That's another kind of concentration. So in terms of this market, and also we have cyber attribution issues, a lot of difficulty to understand who should be accountable, that create a legal incapable, legal handicap to identify who should be accountable for that outcome. So that's multiple, I should say, it's a double penalty, because not only the market concentration, but the technology concentration as well. So it's really painful. I have no clue. Sorry.
If I can join something regarding this, not my area anyway, but I think the market will make the need. And you will continue to see a growing of cables. And when you start to talk about disruptive technology, when you talk about quantum computing, artificial intelligence, the need for data, the need for very low latencies will bring the hyperscales to force the market to have more and more cables. What I would like to just on this, see what will happen if we have the agreement between European Union and Mercosur in place. What will bring regarding need of transactions of all of that? So it's something that probably the market will answer in a certain way. This is my opinion anyway.
Thank you. Okay. More questions?
Thank you very much. My name is Vittorio Cardoso. I would like to address the questions to the panelists, to the speakers, but to address as well to the Professor Kenny Huang, as you are very knowledgeable about People's Republic of China and on these issues. Do you think that the Portuguese Consul General in Macau, that since 2023 is non-stop and very aggressively promoting the cooperation on blue economy and blue tech through Macau non-stop until today, as we speak, do you think that these could be a threat to the national security, or should he just calm down or even halt this kind of works?
Yeah, what I say, because China already identified deep seabed will be a national strategy. So once they identify national strategy, of course, he will mobilize all the viable resource. Macau could be one of the options, try to encourage Macau to have a blue economy and blue market, and even the district As I mentioned, they have military civil fusion strategy. So initially, they were mobilized not only not to the military, but mobilized all the industry players, go to participate in that kind of blue ocean development, starting from access to the ocean to exploration of the ocean, and finally try to develop the ocean. Once everything was getting mature, you have all technology, all the infrastructure in the deep sea, and you have everything. You have all the data set collected for training your artificial intelligence. Then he can do whatever he wants. He can repurpose to different strategic operation quickly. So I think Macau is one good example. He was using Macau as one showcase. Say Macau will bring the blue economy, and through Macau they can have a Pacific Ocean strategy, especially in the deep sea. So they have a lot of undersea activity for scientific activity already. So that's really a great national security concern, not only for Taiwan, I think for many other states as well, because we don't have that kind of commitment to have identify this as a national strategy.
So in this case, Portugal is opening a backdoor.
Somehow.
And one more question, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the interventions. My question is more or less regarding the relation between private and the sector. We mentioned repair, the importance of maintenance and repair, but when we think in the major consortiums, they are all private, and they all have a clause that says that they do not operate in severe conflict or war situations. So my question is, should we think resilience also in having this kind of means within state, like in navies or whatever? Thank you very much.
Olivia, I guess this one is first for you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the question. I do think that that's a very important consideration and something definitely for governments to be thinking about. But again, I think what I would emphasize here is that when we know that there are still policy gaps in terms of how we can make rapid repair of cables when there are disruptions easier, that we should make sure that governments are also paying attention to those issues and not just only focused on vessel capacity.
Mm-hmm. Professor Huang, you want to?
Oh, just mentioned already, and basically it's very hard question because, for example, like Taiwan, we did have do some investigation to have our maintenance capacity, but eventually realized it's not financially justified and it's technically not viable because the cost is too high. So we need to find out, either collaborate with our international partner and collaborate with private sector to see is there any other way we can mitigate that kind of threat. Yeah, it's an issue for us.
Yeah, I think it's the same that you say, Ken. We can, in a certain way, to use the same model that we use for oceanographic assets. It make a certain way a mutualization of assets regarding that. But I think it's a very expensive investment. And what will be the response of the private sector regarding that?
Okay, thank you so much for your interventions. Thank you so much for being here. We learned a lot, at least I did. There was this coincidence, I was preparing an article about submarine cables, and then they invite me. So I have a lot of information now. Thank you, and well, see you next time, because this is falling from my ear.
Thank you, everyone.